it's Cunningham from Diaspora Kids Lit. I'm a writer and the founder of this reading challenge. We're on a mission to read our way around Africa, Caribbean, USA, Canada and beyond. There is a wealth of talented authors out there and we just want to showcase and highlight that. And so join us while we go on a magical journey to discover all of the talent the Diaspora has to offer. We kicked off our reading challenge in the Caribbean, and first in focus was the island of Antigua, which is a beautiful island. It has over 365 beaches. That's a beach for every day of the year for all of us who love beaches. And today it's a pleasure to welcome the talented Antiguan author Joanne.C.Hillhouse to the show. Joanne is one of the Caribbean's shining stars. She's written a number of books over a number of genres. Joanne has also worked as a journalist and is a working editor. And one of the most amazing feats, and why I'm excited to talk to her today, she also founded the Wadadli Youth Pen Prize, showcasing literature for young writers in Antigua and Barbuda. And I love that. I love authors supporting authors. So it is a pleasure to have you here today, Joanne.
And it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. You know, we first really came in touch with your work by reading your latest book, which is The Jungle Outside, which we really, really enjoyed. You have it. It's published by Harper Collins as part of their Big Cat series. So it's really good for children in terms of their, learning, reading, phonics as well. And we just loved the wonderful story of Dante and his grandmother, Tanti, and how she helps him discover that there is more to life than inside and go outside. And we need that in these times that we're living in. I'm excited you're here with us, and I'd love to find out from you where the inspiration came for The Jungle Outside.
The inspiration was actually my mother, who is an avid gardener, who has, I would say, a magic ability to make things grow from the hardest and most resistant soil. And when my nephew was younger, he would just be following her all over the place outside. But as he got older, he was always with his head buried in the device. And I think I have two children's stories now that were inspired by that particular nephew and his mannerisms and just the way I actually think he's the future writer in the family because he's so dynamic. But anyway, it was her and her interactions with him that inspired the story. And also, I love mangoes.
Yes. And so, like I said initially, you've written so many books in different genres. Do you feel like you have a favorite genre, or you have one of your books that's your most precious to you?
Oh, that's like asking a parent to say who's their favorite
child.
They have children that they like for different reasons, but they love all their children equally. I mean, presumably, we hope. If not, heaven help us. But I mean, the next book is always the one that I'm most excited about, the thing that I'm writing next. By the time the stories that I've written come out, I've already sort of detached with love a little bit from them. My first book, The Boy from Willow Bend, will obviously always hold a special place in my heart because it opened the door. And because that first book kind of represents, in a way, the first world that you knew. Mm-hmm. But there have been variations of my world in all of my books. So I love all of them for different reasons. I don't have a favorite genre because I don't write according to genre. I don't write according to audience. I write to tell the story. And I write to take this journey with these characters. I mean, the most profound recent-ish experience of that was with the characters in Musical Youth, where Musical Youth is a teen young adult novel that I wrote, and it's the quickest thing I've ever written. I wrote it almost like in a in a fugue, when you're in the zone and you're just kind of writing in every spare moment. Yeah, I don't remember sleeping during that period because I was just enjoying hanging out with these characters so much. So it's always character, it's always story, and the story then finds its form.
Yeah.
I never set out to write a children's book. I had stories that were written, and then because I'm always scouting for opportunities, when I see a call for, something that I think might fit, then I would submit it. And it turns out, oh, it is a children's book. And then, of course, you work with the editors and the reading specialists to make sure the vocabulary and the story development is accessible to children. But I don't set out to write for this or that or the other. I just set out to tell a story.
And that's the best way. Yeah, that is.
Yeah, the only way. It's the only way I can do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and with that, with writers, many people, they have aspirations to write, but they really struggle to get started. And I just wanted to know what actually led you to become an author.
I think you are, well, for me, my experience, I can't speak for everyone's journey. I think you are, you're not. Obviously, you can learn the skills as you go, but the urge to write exists even before you have the skills to tell. So the urge to tell a story exists even before you even know what a writer is and what a writer does. And so for me, I was a writer even before I felt the power to claim that I was a writer, because coming from where I come from, I didn't have models that said to me this was a path that I could take. And to be honest with you, to this day, I'm still trying to figure out if this is a path. But
Yeah.
it's kind of, it's less about how to become, so more so about accepting that this is who you are and this is the journey you must take. And then trying to do the research and do the practice and tap into every opportunity to find avenues, to create avenues for yourself to tell your story. And then, of course, once I published my first book, actually, The Boy from Willowbend, came about. I had studied at the University of the West Indies. I had a mentor there, Mervyn Morris, who's one of Jamaica's well-known poets and poet laureate of Jamaica for a time. At the time, he was just my professor, and whatever he saw in me, he recommended me for the Caribbean Fiction Writers Summer Institute at the University of Miami. I did that. My workshop leader was Olive Senior, who's Commonwealth Award winning novelist Olive Senior, and I had to go through the baptism by fire of workshopping your work and finding out that it's not good enough and you got to do better. And the better became The Boy from Willowbend, which I started working on that summer, and then spent many years submitting it to every opportunity I could think of and trying to get it published, many years. And it was a long time, years. I was working as a journalist, I was still writing. There were times when I was despairing that I would ever find that creative opportunity. And then I submitted it one last time. Macmillan was starting a new Caribbean Writers series, and I submitted one last time. I just quit my job at the time. Yeah. So it was kind of like one of those on the precipice moments. And I submitted it, and they accepted it, and they published it. And shortly after that, they also published Dancing with the Moonlight. I don't have a relationship with Macmillan anymore. The books are since been released by the publishers. But that was the first stepping stone. And if I had to say anything to other writers, it's that claiming who you are, and it's finding the persistence against the obstacles to keep going and to stay open to the opportunities. They say luck is when preparation meets opportunity. You always stay preparing, and when the opportunity comes, you step into it. And that's what I try to do. And then, of course, with the Wadadli Youth Pen Prize, I try to do what I can because to create what wasn't there for me, which is here are resources that you need to know this about copyright, you need to know this about submitting, you need to know this about getting paid, you need to know this about all the things that I had to learn brutally. I tried to pass on through Wadadli Pen. And then, of course, I also tried to create opportunities for young writers to put their work out. So we have the Wadadli Pen Challenge, but the website itself has developed into this resource of databases about the process, opportunities, resources, publishers, markets for journals, just everything I can think of, everything I've been through that I can pass on to someone else. That's what I try to do through Wadadli Pen. So to answer your question, check Wadadli Pen and find resources as to how you can access your path as a writer.
Exactly. And also like you just really explained, your motivation for starting the Youth Pen Prize was because you didn't have that resource for yourself. And was there any other motivation behind starting the prize?
No, I was in Canada at I think it was a literary expo for Caribbean writers. I'd been invited, I just published and I'd been invited to represent Antigua. And I was at a luncheon where a Guyanese writer, Royal Johnson, he spoke about the lack of nurseries for writers in the Caribbean. And something about what he said resonated with me. Because that's what it was. A nursery is a place where you learn to play and to grow and to make mistakes and to figure out the world. And as a writer in the Caribbean, you kind of just, you come out of the womb of figuring out you're a writer, and now it's like, oh, get up and walk, get up and run. And it's like, where's the hand holding? Where's the spoon feeding? Where's the helping along the way? And so when he said that, the lack of nurseries, I took that back home with me. And I remember I spoke to a writer friend of mine, Giselle Isaac, and I said, I want to set up something. And she was my first partner. She has a book called Considering Venus, which is anyway, that's another book that I think has been overlooked. But that's another thing I've done is I've created a database of all the books by Antiguans and Barbudans on the site, and of course links to Caribbean writers and so on. But the point is, I came back home, I spoke with her youth publication, they put out a weekly periodical, and I said, let's do something. And we started. It was as simple as that. And to be honest with you, because we've only just recently received our, with the help of a lawyer, finally, a registration as a nonprofit. I've been doing this with different rotating people over the years, and now have a team together of what can we do to create a foundation so that this doesn't end with me, so that if I can't carry it forward anymore, it can still go forward because it has ability to access funding. It has the team in place and the process for selecting people to replace the team when the time comes and so on. So it was really about creating something foundational. And I think if I had understood at the time how much work was involved, I maybe wouldn't have done it. Yeah. But there was a time when I put it on pause. But part of what made me continue it and pick it up again and continue it even in this last hellish year that we've had is there's this thing when it comes to the arts in Antigua that things start and don't stop. We pioneer so many things. We had a jazz festival before other countries. We had a literary festival before some other countries, and we have a one-off thing and then it goes away. And I didn't want Wadadli Pen to be this one-off thing that goes away. I wanted it to be something foundational and consistent, sustainable and self-sustaining. So yeah.
Yeah, you wanted it to sort of be a legacy, and I love that. That's why we set up Diaspora Kids Lit, because I want to celebrate the wealth of talent that there is amongst the diaspora, and I love that in what you're doing in Antigua and Barbuda. It's really good.
And congratulations to you on what you're doing as well. It's very, very necessary. As someone who writes and publishes, I know how hard it is to stand out from the crowd to get your works seen. It doesn't matter how good or bad it is. It's about how visible it is sometimes, and finding the niche audience that can then champion the book and then bring it to wider audiences. And platforms like yours are vital for underrepresented groups. Underrepresented groups in just in this body that I exist in include Black, female, Caribbean, all the things that are way off the map. And so you need people to champion the books, and you need people to reach for those books that other mainstream voices are not looking for and push them. And I applaud what you're doing, and I thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. So like you just spoke about writing, obviously I aspire to write as well, and there's always challenges with writing, finding time, writer's block, maybe. It depends what you think, if that exists or not.
It does.
Yeah.
It totally does. It totally does. I mean, more power to those who don't have it, but yeah, it totally does.
Yeah. But what would you say is the most difficult part of the writing process for you?
To be honest with you, right now it's the logistics of being a writer and navigating the world. In the sense that sometimes it's the noise of the world. You can have, I mean, I'm writing something right now, and it's like the characters are with me, but it's tuning out the world to be able to focus on them. And the world includes paying your bills and dealing with, you know, your relationships and eating and running errands. Like the world is it's not it's a luxury to be able to sit down and just write. It's a luxury to say, you know, they have that thing about every writer should have a room of their own. It's a luxury to have a room of your own in the world that I come from. So you almost have to fight for that space where the creative lives in you. And that's a fight that I have to have every day with myself, that it's okay to sit and just write, even if you're worried about this other thing. Because if you do this other thing and you don't do this writing thing, your life lacks spark, it lacks meaning, lacks purpose. Because this is what matters to you. So it's a way of trying to find a way to balance those necessities with the creative spark. That is, I think, the most challenging thing. And maybe that's what some people mean when they say the writer's block doesn't exist. Because I found it, for example, with Wadadli Pen, that when I was at Wadadli Pen with Musical Youth, when I started writing Musical Youth, I was on deadline with the editing project. I had no time. I had nothing, and yet still I found it. So that whole idea of you can make the time if the story is this, it's not the block. It's insisting on making the space for the writing. So I experienced that in the case of Musical Youth, that it wasn't that I didn't have, it wasn't that I was blocked, it was that I didn't prioritize the writing in that space. But to be quite honest, it's a luxury sometimes to be able to prioritize when you've got to do life.
Yes.
You know, like especially if you're one of those underrepresented groups. I mean, for instance, I took on my first intern recently to help me with certain things, but also even the idea of taking on an internship as a writer, because he's an aspiring writer, is a luxury. Because if you're doing an unpaid internship, you still got to make your bills, you still got to do. So you have to be able to support yourself in order to do an internship that can help you figure out this writing thing sometimes as well. So all of the things that you need to feed the life that will allow you to do the creative thing is sometimes the biggest challenge. What I'm trying to do with my intern is we're doing a sort of exchange thing. Since it's an unpaid internship, but it's paid in terms of my time, I give him the opportunity to learn things and to get feedback on his writing and so on from me, because it's something, this service I provide, manuscript critique and so on, and so it has a money value. So this is how I'm trying to navigate that, while also he helps me out with some things as well. So, and he's actually one of the former Wadadli Pen finalists. And he was very persistent. He's been emailing me for like a year. Like, so I met with him and I explained to him, I can't pay you. And he's like, no, I want, you know, I'm like, okay, let's do it. Let's do it. And I said, I made him write to me because I wanted to set the expectations and manage the expectations. What is it that you're getting from this? What is it? You know, that, and he articulated it. And I was like, okay, he's in the right headspace. I'm not going to hear down the road that I exploited him or something. You know, a give and take. So, you know, so I brought up the internship thing to say, even having the resources to be able to say, okay, I can do this thing that's going to feed my writing is a luxury.
Yeah.
You know, so those are the challenges. Those are the challenges for, I would say, underrepresented groups. And I think any way that that is the people who have the resources, whether it's the government or private citizens, to support the work of writers, whether it's through, like you guys did, leaving a review. whether it's through philanthropy, financially, whether it's through supporting projects, whether it's through buying a book and passing it on. Support the work, because the work ain't easy.
Yeah, exactly. It's those little small ways that you can support just by buying the book, like you said, passing it on to others and leaving review. It's so important to, to authors that have put all of that time in. But I love the fact that you've got an intern and how tenacious he was. And maybe if it wasn't for the Youth Pen Prize that you set up, that would have never manifested it itself. So yeah, so that's really good. And in terms of writing, it can empower you, but it can also make you feel very vulnerable, because like you said, you're putting your creative spark on that page. And what risks have you taken in your writing career which you feel like have really paid off for you, and that you may have had reservations about?
Well, I think every time, to be honest with you, every time I submit something, it's a risk and there's a vulnerability to it, because it is taking off a part of yourself and exposing it to the scrutiny of others. And sometimes people are not always kind in how they scrutinize the thing. Part of being a writer is preparing yourself for the blowback and the feedback of the work being out there. And at that point, it no longer belongs to you, it belongs to the people. So every time you put your work out there, every time you submit, and every time you get rejected, for me anyway, it's rough. Sometimes it's rougher than others, because once you get into the rhythm of it, you kind of know what to expect. But sometimes you end up bawling your eyes out because you really had hoped. So for me, every time I take a chance and put it out there, when I quit my last job, that was a huge that was everybody looking at me crazy. And since then, I've had ups and downs, and I've tried to build a career as an independent freelance journalist and writer. And these years later, I'm still an independent freelance journalist and writer. I've made mistakes, and I have been in valleys. But for now, knock on wood, I'm still independent and freelance. But that first leap, that was perhaps the craziest thing. But in spite of the ups and downs, I don't regret it.
Yes.
The leap was with that. If I had taken that leap, there's so many things, so many adventures, so many opportunities that wouldn't have happened. And yes, I've lost things, and yes, I've suffered things, but there's so many other good things that probably wouldn't have happened. And every time I send a work out, every time I put myself out there, it's true for any writer.
Yeah.
That every time you put yourself out there, you're putting your heart on the line. It might sound melodramatic, but it is sometimes, depending on the story, cutting yourself open and bleeding a little bit onto the page. Some of the stuff that I've written, I haven't been able to go back and read it because it's painful to read it. But yet it's out there. And of course, people weigh in, and you kind of take it in and try not to react too much to it, because it's part of the process, and it's not, I don't ever want to influence a reader's reaction to the book. I want honest reaction, even if you hate the book. But I hope you don't hate the book.
No, we love the jungle outside. We don't hate this book. Like I see you collaborating with other Caribbean artists in the creation of your books, and like the jungle outside, the author illustrator Danielle Badu Fortune was brought on board.
Daniel Fortune.
Yes, and was brought on board to help you illustrate. And there's a wealth of undiscovered writers from around the Caribbean and the African diaspora. And, do you have advice for authors within these regions on how best we can collectively support each other? I think you know, sometimes you can feel like you're in isolation in your work, especially as a writer, and then you could try to get it out there to other platforms. Do you think there's things that we can do as a collective?
Well, I mean, definitely. I mean, one of the things that used to exist that I kind of feel sad about doesn't anymore. There was a platform, Caribbean Literary Salon, which is where I met a lot of the Caribbean writers that I have any sort of relationship with, because we used to have like an atelier there. We used to workshop pieces there, give each other feedback. We used to share work. We used to give advice on promoting work, all that sort of thing. Right now, that platform doesn't exist anymore. You have, but you do have, you know, formal platforms like Bocas. I'm doing a workshop in October with Bocas on children's book writing. They have workshops all through the year, so that's an example of spaces in which, you know, knowledge is transferred. Locally, buy the books. Buy the books, and if you get a review copy, if you get freebs, then post a review, give some feedback. Whenever I get a complimentary copy of a book, I try to make sure that I pay the author by at least posting a review. And I do that with books that I buy as well. So that's one way you support each other as authors, because authors, I suppose, some of the most authoritative voices are, okay, what works and what doesn't work in this book. When people write to me for advice, I do try to answer, because I know when I was trying to figure out how to get on, I didn't always get answers, because writers are busy, and as busy as I am, sometimes it's inconvenient. And that's why one of the reasons I tried to create the database, that I can direct people to, okay, I can't give you a full comprehensive answer, but check this link, that kind of thing. So I guess, you know, trying to keep the network open. With the Collins Big Cat series, I know when Collins approached me, I recommended as many Caribbean writers as I could think of. I sent them a whole list.
I love that.
And I sent them a list of illustrators as well. And then, you know, I would follow up. Did you check with this person? Did you check with that person? So that's a way you try to help each other, is to recommend and put each other's names forward into spaces where we are not. So I did that with, in terms of, I must clarify that in terms of my books, there's the jungle, in terms of the illustrated books, there's The Jungle Outside and Lost, which I did, which were illustrated by Daniel. This is Lost, the Caribbean Sea Adventure. And with Grace, which was illustrated by Cherise Harris. And these are my 3 children's picture books. The publisher hires the illustrator.
Yeah.
Right, so that's not, and specifically in terms of Cherise Harris, I had no input in the hiring of her, although I love her work. I think she did an amazing job. In the case of Danielle, with Lost, I recommended her both times because I love her art. I love her poetry. It's really not fair that she's so good at both poetry and art, but
yeah.
God was in a good mood the day he gave her talents, because she's extremely talented. And so I recommended her both times, but I also tried, before Antiguan artists come for me, I always recommend Antiguan artists, always. The first book that I had, before Lost became Lost, it was another publisher, and it was illustrated by an Antiguan writer called Xavier and Archibald, because I recommended her because I thought her work would be a good fit for the world of the story. I recommend other Antiguan writers, and then the publishers decide, looking at the work, who they think is a good fit for the work. But the point is, larger question is, recommend each other, support each other, don't bad talk each other in back rooms and in cliques and whatever. Support each other.
Definitely, you know, got to help each other rise. And so, do you have any current projects you're working on or upcoming releases? You're a writer, you're always working on something, but.
I am. I'm going to try, I know we're talking children's books today, but I'm actually going to try to do some adult writing today. I got a question. I was promoting my children's books on social media recently, and I got a question. So are you just doing children's books now? And I'm like, no. That no, I mean, that was the most polite no I could give, but I really felt like no, no. I tell stories. I tell stories, and the stories take different forms. And I really hate this idea of, and I suppose it's part of the nature of publishing that people have to know what your label is, but I don't like labels. So I don't think of myself as a children's book writer. I think of myself as a writer, and I tell children's stories, and I tell teen and young adult stories. I tell adult stories of different genres, because if I see an opportunity to experiment with a ghost story or a zombie story or romance or the historical fiction, I'm going to try it, because I just like experimenting in the space of telling stories. One of the things I'm working on right now is I was invited to submit something to this world that already exists. It's a speculative world that already exists, and telling stories within that world, which is an interesting and new challenge for me, because normally I create my own worlds, but now I have to kind of read the Bible, because they have a Bible. This is what these are the this world. Not an outline. They have a Bible. This is how air works in this world. This is how houses are built in this world.
Oh, so it's like fantasy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I'm telling a story in that world. And I'm working on something, and I have no idea if it's any good, but the challenge is interesting and scary as hell, because it's uncharted territory, and I don't know if they'll like what I submit, but hopefully it will. But more importantly, hopefully I will tap into something interesting in telling the story. So that's something I'm working on. I have been working on a short story collection, an adult short story collection, that I've been calling Stupid Children and Difficult Women.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. That I don't know. I think I should clarify that. It's not literal, but it's kind of how the stories have come together. Stupid in the Caribbean sense of innocent. Children are innocent. My mom has a saying that children are like fowl. You tell them shoo shoo and they come back. So.
Yeah.
So, and difficult women, because that's how we're branded when we have opinions or whatever experiences that insist that our stories and our voices matter. And when we make mistakes and are messy, like I have a blog post I wrote one time called "To Be Messy is Human," because it seems that women are expected to be, perfect against all the obstacles, and I disagree. I am so imperfect, and I think that I'm allowed to be imperfect and to learn and grow. So these are the stories I'm exploring in that collection. It's women who are just themselves, and children who are stupid.
I like it. I look forward to it. So I have got with me, I've got like Diaspora Kids Lit's youngest reader here. She's obviously the one that read The Jungle Outside initially. She just wanted to come and say hello and rate the book, because we all know that children are the realest critics on the planet. They're very honest. They don't hold back. So she just wanted to come and say hello.
Hi.
Hi, Joanne. Nice to meet you.
Same here. Nice to meet you.
If I had to rate your book out of 5, I would rate it a 5. And I really like Tanti in the book.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have a 5-star review. So I appreciate the generosity.
That's good. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
And so it is. Yeah, so it's inspired by the children and making sure that they're represented, and they can see themselves as protagonists in stories that, for me, that's what this whole Diaspora Kids Lit is inspired by, is the children. But it's
okay. I could just say my favorite part of the review when I read it is her reaction to Tanti.
Yes.
Tanti was a character I fought to get right. Daniel and I, in the exchange about framing designing these characters, that the version of Tanti that exists in the book was not the original version. And that was one of the things that we went back and forth on a little bit. I was like, no, I need her to be more. I said, I want her to have purple in her hair. I want her to have natural I wanted to have this, right?
Yes.
And I wanted to be dark skinned. And I
Yeah.
wanted, Granny on the block playing hand tennis in the street. I want her to be the grannies that I want to be like my mom, to be quite
Yeah.
honest. So that when kids look, they can see someone that looks like them. So I was really happy to read that part of the reaction, that she had that reaction to it, because I think Danielle did an amazing job of
Mm.
translating that into visuals.
Yeah, because she was just like, wow, like she's beautiful, Tanti, and that's, you're seeing yourself in that beauty, and I think that is, yeah, I think that's really
It's
amazing.
so vital.
It's so
It's so
vital
vital.
to their future, and how they see themselves. But it has been a real pleasure to have you obviously here today, and thank you for taking the time out to come on the show. And for people wanting to purchase your books, where can they find them and where can they connect with you? I know you have your own blog spot as well. So where can they find you and purchase the book?
Well, you don't purchase the books directly from me. The books are available wherever books are sold in terms of online, from the indie online retailers to the juggernauts like Amazon,
Yeah.
and at your local bookstore. In terms of your local bookstore, one of the ways that you can help writers is by asking for books at your local bookstore. There are lots of books out there, and the buyers will only know about the books that are not on the mainstream popped up if you kind of create a demand for them. So go to your local bookstore and say, do you have so-and-so by Joanne Hillhouse, or why not? Can I get it? So you can encourage them to carry. So that's how you get my books, is by asking for them at your local bookstore or purchasing them online. Some are available as ebooks as well. Some are available as audiobooks as well. And of course, the print, some hardcover, some softcover. In terms of where to find me online, I am Joadli everywhere except YouTube, where I am Antiguan writer. So I'm Antiguan writer on YouTube. I am Joadli, JHOHADLI, JHOHADLI, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. I'm probably on Pinterest too. I'm everywhere. And I have a blog called johadli.wordpress.com, where I talk about books and writing and whatever else is on my mind.
Thank you. If you check out the description box below, we'll leave the link for Joanne there. Thank you for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. You can follow us on Instagram to find a wealth of diverse titles at Diaspora Kids Lit. Children need the gift of reading to inspire their minds, and it's young readers who are going to make our future leaders.